What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Turn the Jets podcast. I'm your host, Will Parkinson, at WillPod11 on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. All 32 Pod. TOJ talks the whole 9 yards. Back-to-back days here on the feed. Devin McCourty yesterday. Now an even bigger guest. Not three-time Super Bowl champ, but I can assure you, Devin has not been on The Bachelor. So that is one Mike has in his cap. And Notre Dame's better than Rutgers. So we're 2 for 2 here. Mike Renner's and CBS Sports Pushing the Pile podcast. Mike, how we doing?
Amazing intro. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we both be Devin McCourty, strengths and weaknesses. We each have our own.
Yeah, listen, body type. We're looking at different body types. We're doing different
100%.
Golf games.
We're playing just different positions here. You don't compare a nose tackle to a corner.
Yeah, we're not going to evaluate a coach's son, to a generational athlete. We're just not going to do that. So obviously, we were down in Mobile last week. We're coming off, the 2 weeks week and a half, whatever it is, of kind of the all-star circuit for college football. Now we're going to Super Bowl, obviously, this weekend, and we'll touch on that at the end. But then we're really full-fledged into draft mode. I know you kind of live in draft mode all year, but I guess what have you, just like big picture, this class got a lot of heat of like, hey, there's not the elite. This isn't last year's class of quarterbacks, or this isn't 2021 of like 8 of the 12 guys are all pros already, and like the Jets and Bears and Jags drafted they drafted the quarterbacks, everyone else got an all pro. What do you make of this class overall? There's been a lot of talk of like 20 through 60 is good, but we don't know. Like, what do you make of the talk about this class overall to start?
Yeah, I tend to agree. It's unfair that last year's class was so good, right? If you just look how they played as rookies. Like it came to fruition. I said it all last year. I'm like, this is a unique class. You don't want to, trade way back and miss out because there are just so many guys at the top, so many blue chip guys. It was unique in that regard. But this year's class, it ain't 2022, right? Where we're talking Trayvon Walker versus Aiden Hutchinson at the top of the draft. It's got depth. Like there are day 2 of this draft class are a lot of guys I'm going to like a lot, and it's really going to test your might as a scout. But I do think there's only 2 guys who are like surefire picks, right? You have Abdul Carter, the Penn State edge. You have Travis Hunter, the Colorado wide receiver / corner. After that, there's just a ton of question marks. There's probably not a single guy that I could really stick a pin in and say, I feel good that he'll be a Pro Bowler someday. So it lacks the blue chip talent. Pick 6 may not be too different of a grade on my board than pick 20. It's one of those years, whereas last year was distinctly different, right? Malik Neighbors was way better than the guy more likely than not you're getting at pick 20, or just like more likely than the guy you're getting at pick 20 this year. But it's not completely lacking in talent. It's not a terrible down year. It's just lacking the top guys that we usually like to, talk about all draft season.
Yeah, it feels like this draft class, while it lacks in quarterbacks, defensive line, both edge and interior, which is rare. Usually it's one or the other. Tight end, running back, really strong classes. Like this, if you need a running back, tight end, or defensive lineman, like this is the year. If you need a tackle or a quarterback, or even arguably a number 1 bona fide star receiver, there's been better years for you to need that. Yeah. The Jets are in a precarious spot because while they do need, probably a complement to Garrett long term, or probably do need a right tackle long term, with Morgan Moses. We'll see. He's probably back next year, but who knows? The other 4 guys are solidified. And obviously quarterback, we're not going to get that much into, but we'll get into some of the dart throw guys on day 2, day 3. They do need defensive linemen. They do need tight ends. And I would argue you should always take a running back pretty much every year, the same way with quarterback, because these guys get hurt and they filter through. Yeah. Is there some guys from the last week and a half, the Senior Bowl, there were some really good defensive linemen down there. There were some really good tight ends, running backs. Like, were there some guys that stood out to you specifically who either improved their stock or confirmed priors for you watching tape all year?
Yeah, there were probably a couple guys who, not day 1 picks, but I think really improved their stock. And really got me excited because this is a deep D-line class. But Darius Alexander from Toledo is who I'll start with. I think his name like MVP of the defensive line for the week of. He's a guy who, 300 pounds, but he can play on the edge too. He can play all up and down the defensive line. In today's day and age, those guys are invaluable, right? Just with the multiple fronts that you're seeing. So he is a guy that on the outside, on the interior, over the week of practices at the Senior Bowl, that he could win from all of those. It just didn't look out of place at any of them. The other guy along the defensive line that I really liked, I think he made himself a ton of money just in terms of solidifying where he is Mike Green from Marshall, a guy who didn't measure in anything special, right? Just over 32-inch arms. 251 pounds, though, which is a really good number for him because he's not carrying a lot of body fat. He doesn't have your traditional long edge frame, but man, he just wins. He just knows how to rush the passer. He's a guy that maybe not similar to Will McDonald as like a player, but just in terms of how I feel about him, it's just like, I know that guy can rush the passer. I don't know if he can do much else, right, at the NFL level, but like, I know that body type and that movement pattern can rush the passer. So obviously Will McDonald goes all the way to 15, right? I think is where he came off the board. I think we could see Mike Green come off the board in a similar area. So honestly, a lot of the edge guys made money for themselves. I think the guy I love, who I love going in, and I love even more now, David Walker, Central Arkansas, who's 6 foot 267, but good luck stopping his bull rush. I mean, the guy he's built like a jumbo running back, built like Michael Turner is his body count. And Michael Turner rushing the passer probably would have been a pretty mean bull rush. And David Walker, man, no one stopped his bull rush. Not a single person when he went to it at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, no, I think there's an argument. Jets fans, edge rusher is like the one spot where it's like, hey, we always go edge it. And like in the first round, it feels like, but there's an argument. Is 7 too high for Mike Green? Probably, but like, you also could be like, hey, like, I get it. Jermaine's coming off the Achilles. I think 7's too high for Shamar Stewart, but if you told me that someone takes him in the top 10, wouldn't be shocked at all. I talked to you about it. We're down in Mobile, like, he's going to run sub 4.5 at 280 plus pounds. Yeah, I was told he ran 4.5 flat apparently last week. So,
I mean, I'm not
we'll see. I don't know.
I'm not doubting it based off his tape. I'm more just like, is it possible for a guy to do that? Because he's huge.
He kind of looks like Clowney and Myles Garrett in a lab. He's huge. He's literally huge.
Yeah.
And crazy arm length and different things like that. At pick 7, you mentioned, hey, there might be, on some people's boards, the guy that goes 6 could be 20. Some people, Jaylen Walker is a guy I know I've talked to you about. And to me, I think at pick 7 is fair value. Like, I think he's one of the best players in the class. I understand there's some questions of, hey, is he an edge? Is he a linebacker? He's a little bit of a tweener, which is always, you got to go to the right system. Mm-hmm. That said, like, part of me feels like Quincy Williams and Jaylen Walker running around on third down would cause a lot of CTE around the league, and it'd be pretty fun. Like, I know he's not, if you view him as a linebacker, 7's rich, right? Like, I get that. But I think he can play full-time edge, or you just use him as, like, he moves around down by down. He's your, I'm really fucking smart and I can put him wherever I want guy. What do you make of Jaylen Walker? I think he's the guy that we'll see the most fluctuation of. Top 5 guy for some people, top 50 guy for others.
He was a guy who I actually wanted to discuss with some of the people I trust and like evals down at Shrine and Senior Bowl, just to pick their brain. Because I watched his tape and I had him when I ranked my big board, top 50. And I did final evals, they were like full tape evals on most of that top 50. And I was like, dude, I had him at 5. And I was like, am I crazy putting him at 5 when his role at Georgia is kind of just what you mentioned. Like, he's off ball sometimes, he's on the edge sometimes. But when he just rushed the passer off the edge, I saw freakish ability, like truly high-end stuff. And then in my head, I'm like, why isn't Kirby using him there? But like, Kirby has misused guys in that defensive front for years because he's had just so much talent that, he hasn't had to necessarily put guys on the edge. So talk to some guys, and most of the people I trusted in their evals are like, yeah, I feel the exact same way that I do about Jaylen Walker as you do. They're like, I just think this guy's got it. And the rep I go back to that I thought was just out of this world, I don't know if you watched his Texas tape. He has this rep where he engages Kelvin Banks, the left tackle, who's very likely going to be a top 10 pick, top 15 at worst. Engages him with one arm, gets chipped by the running back, and as he's getting chipped, he pulls Kelvin Banks flat on his face as he's getting chipped. And I'm like, this 242-pounder just threw down a 320-pounder with one arm. And like, that guy can rush the passer at the NFL level. If you can do stuff like that, you're a guy that can manhandle NFL OTs also.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody that's this guy in the league, and they were basically like kind of same thing. I was like, dude, I love this guy. Like, I want him on the Jets at 7. Like, I think he'd be a great.
Yeah.
And I was like, what am I missing? He's like, watch him in run fits. Like, this guy at 240 pounds plays the run better than I think he plays run better than Michael Williams, who's like they built in a lab, has 900-foot arms, and like I don't know. I saw Georgia Auburn in person this year, field level, and like the difference in the pads popping when Jaylen Walker was hitting people versus anybody else in a Georgia defense, including like, you know, you got Dane Jackson, all these different guys that like they like to lay like that Georgia defense is nasty, and I felt like he's the guy. I was like, whoa, like who is 11? I just went in like tried to like no priors and just whatever. So yeah, I'm glad we kind of touched on that. You mentioned some of the offensive line here. Is there any guy that you view as a true tackle that you would take in the top 10? Like, is this like Olu to me would have been the Jets. I'm glad they got him when they did, because in reality, Olu's going in the top 7 easily in this class, like no question. I know he's as a true left tackle.
100%. Yeah, I think in this class, Olu is your OT1 by a clear margin. It's always hard because like top 10 in a vacuum, you have to really compare it year on year. But when you go back and go like most of the OTs that have gone top 10 over the past 5 years, there's not a guy in this class like Andrew Thomas, Jedrick Wills. I don't think there's a guy in this class that would have a higher grade on than any of those. Penei Sewell don't have a higher grade than obviously him. I think Ike Ekwonu, Evan Neal, Charles Cross, that was 2022. That was like the weak class. That's like the caliber of tackle I think you're getting in the top 10. And so I think they'll go in the top 10 because, again, weak class. The need's still there for a lot of teams. But that's kind of the caliber we're working with. And you're seeing that 3 years in, one of those guys is an okay starter in Ike Ekwonu. One of those guys can't see the field in Evan Neal. And one of those guys is probably a plus starter in Charles Cross. So, like, that's kind of where you're at if you're drafting someone like a Kelvin Banks, if you're drafting someone like a Will Campbell. Now, I think Campbell's probably the safest of that bunch. Like, I feel his floor is probably an average starter, and for a lot of teams, that's probably worth a top 10 pick, given just the need around the NFL. But he's just not a guy who excites me a ton based off his tape as a pass protector in terms of his height, in terms of him ever being like an all-pro sort of guy at the left tackle position. So that's just kind of where you're at. I do think, though, this class is uniquely situated to have a bunch of guys come off the board on day 2. There's a bunch of day 2 tackles. Day 2 is obviously not as fruitful as day 1. You look at most Pro Bowls, all pros, usually more often than not, they're day 1 tackles. But Morgan Moses is a day 2 tackle. You can find guys who can be serviceable. So this might be the year, and I don't often advocate for it, to draft a guy in the 2nd or 3rd round at the offensive tackle position.
Yeah, like I think the best teams in the league are able to find even league average starters on day 2, day 3 at guard, at right tackle, at defensive tackle, at cornerback 2 or whatever. Like look at the Chiefs. Like the Chiefs rebuilt their entire roster on the fly with like a bunch of day 3 hits at guard and all, they're basically their whole secondary outside of McDuffie. In terms of quarterback, look, I unless something drastic happens, Cam Ward and Shador will be gone. Although I've shared a million times how I feel about both prospects. I'd really prefer if they stopped like having a borderline like X-rated video every time they hang out, and maybe like competed and actually competed instead of talked about it so much. But all that said, both guys are likely to be gone. 7 taking Jack. There's been a lot of Jackson Dart in the first round. Jackson Dart in the top 10. I'm not sure if that's just his agent working really hard or I'm watching different tape than everybody else. So what do you feel about Dart? And then the rest of this class, is there guys you would take in round 2 or round 3? Or are you like, hey, the value of this quarterback class is early on day 3. Teams will be moving up the board at that like pick 100 range of like, to me, that feels like the sweet spot of this draft, but I know guys are going to get overdrafted. It happens every year.
Yeah, I actually don't have Dart with much lower grade than Shedeur Sanders, but that's actually says more about Sanders, I think, than Dart.
I was going to say, that's not really necessarily a compliment to Shedeur.
Yeah. I think those guys are firmly what I would call like a day 2 quarterback. I mean, it's a dead zone. There's not been a lot of hits on day 2, but I still think that with the nature of the position, it's worth the random chance you get a Kirk Cousins, the random chance you get a Dak Prescott. I think they could fall into that bill at that position, but it's not worth, pick 2, pick 3, pick 6. That's like you're passing on guys who can be cornerstones. So that's where I'm at with this quarterback class. Love Ward. I got Ward way higher than those guys. I think he's just different cat altogether and just different level of physical tools than the other two. But those are the 2 day 2 quarterbacks. After that, it's like that's the quarterback class in my opinion. Everyone else is just you're hoping to get a backup. I do not see the hype on Will Howard. Kyle McCord's probably my quarterback 4, but he's like a statue. He just doesn't fit the bill of what's winning. Yeah, right. Just doesn't fit the bill of what's winning in the NFL. So your upside is again backup quarterback. They're all day 3 guys after that. And then Jalen Milroe. Everyone wants him to be good. Like everyone, he's going to get every chance at quarterback because of how easy it is to play when you have his dynamism at the position, just like what that does for you. But I don't think the developmental tools are there. I don't think the accuracy is there. I don't think the ball security is there. I don't think just the timing is there with him. And as much as he's made some strides, he's not young. He's not Anthony Richardson coming out after 3 years. He is 4 years in now and far, far behind Anthony Richardson from being able to operate from the pocket. So, obviously he wants to play quarterback a bunch. He said, he had a great quote today that was like, you don't ask a zebra to be a dog, which I don't think that's the corollary we're going here. You ask like a zebra to be a horse. Like he could be a horse. He could be a running back. He could be a wide receiver. The guy's dynamic. So I like him as an athlete, but just unless you really have a true starter who's like Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, and you're just going to bring him in and run quarterback runs all day long, I don't think he's your a viable option as like a starter year 1.
Yeah, the Milroe thing, the hand size, we talked about it, is a huge problem. For one, and also,
yeah, I agree.
And also, yeah, and it's like from an accuracy perspective, but the pocket presence, and I know that stuff gets better. You can avoid it. You can kind of do different things, but like the amount of times he got hit in an All-Star game, the way he did on Saturday, it's like that. I don't know. Maybe I'm nitpicking, but that to me was like really concerning. I'm like, dude, get the ball out of your hand. Like, what are we doing here? Like this, you got to move. The clock's got to move here. You like want to like. I don't know. It drives me nuts. It's like one of my biggest pet peeves.
No, you're not wrong about
I don't know. I can't do it. Like I just can't do the. I can't do the bad sack, the bad, the strip sacks over and over. I want to kind of flip to his receiver class because Ted's a guy who, depending on who you talk to, depending on what you see, is he a top 5 pick? Is he's fine, he's good, or he's like, there's Mike Evans comps, there's, because of like the size and the different things, but is that really the best comp for him? Like, where do you view Ted? And then how far behind him is like the Emeka Ibuka, the, Burden? Like how far away is Ted receiver 1, or is he even receiver 1 for you?
I go back and forth. I think him and Luther Burden I think they're the top 2 in this class. The order is more just like what you need. Because I think Ted's much more polished. He has a much higher floor in just being a true receiver, but he is really a true possession type of wide receiver. Very good at it, though. I mean, that guy is smooth for 6'5". It's rare to see a guy that's able to stop, start, get out of his breaks as easily as he does. So there is really a lot to like. And I do think in a certain role, he could be like a really, really good player. 1,500 yards, wouldn't put it past him whatsoever. You're just not getting game changer, right? You're just not getting a guy who I think is a vertical threat at the NFL level consistently. Whereas Burden, much more so that. He's much more big play, explosive play, take a slant, go 60. Like he's that kind of guy. I just need to hear him explain what happened this year because he fell so far out of favor in that offense. He was just a decoy. And it's like, dude, if you're that good, why are we not getting you the ball more? And you can, poke holes all you want, but at the end of the day, took a step back and he did not improve as a route runner. He did not take a next step that people were hoping for after a monster sophomore year. So I think he's the more what you're looking for at the position from a traits perspective. But he doesn't have the polish that Ted McMillan does. So I think both when you come with that big of question marks, it's hard to really go back for them that highly. But there are roles where each will be very, very good NFL players. They're just not like, true, put them out there, ask them to do whatever, and they're going to execute.
Yeah, they're not Malik Neighbors, and even for what it's worth, like Marv had a much better year than anyone wants to admit. 800 yards as a rookie receiver in the NFL is a good thing. Yeah, I know it's when you come to the expectations of what he did, but two guys that are with the Senior Bowl from a receiver perspective that are going to be day two guys. They're not, not day one guys. Jack Bash, obviously, the story is amazing, but like, I'm not poo-pooing it. I will talk about it a million times until I'm blue in the face, and I'll be happy to do so. But he's also a really good player, and to me, like, I see a world in which he's a 2 in the NFL. I'm not saying that's not like a lock, but like he does everything pretty well, and he's huge, and he's actually pretty good after the catch, which I wasn't really. I was a little hesitant, like of sometimes bigger receivers you just don't really know. And then Jaden Higgins as well. Obviously, they're both tall, but like Jaden Higgins is built obviously a little different than Jack Bash. I thought Jaden Higgins had a really good week as well. Do you see both those guys come like top 50 picks? Are we talking top 50, 60? Where do you see those guys kind of falling?
Yeah, I would even throw. I think Omenor from Stanford is kind of in like the same group of wide receivers. They're much more. I don't think anyone has a gear that scares you. I think I have Omenor top of that heap just because I think he is a little bit more vertical threat than any of them. But they're all big bodies, all guys who play through contact very easily, all have fluidity at that size. That's impressive. But all kind of fall in like the Jalen Polk-ish mold. And now Jalen Polk, obviously, this rookie year struggles. That doesn't mean these guys are going to struggle, but they're just not guys who get you super excited about their upside. They're all, like you said, number twos. So it's filled with those guys that you love the size. A lot of guys don't make it in the NFL, or just like it gets more important to be bigger once you get to the NFL, or more physical. You're just going to have to go against guys that every corner you see is 195 plus, right? Like there are not a lot of skinny corners in the league. So that becomes more important. And because of that, I like all those guys. But again, it's just about expectations. They're all guys who can play a nice role for you, but they're not like coming in being number one go-to guys.
Yeah, they're more you guys necessarily would scheme open. Some of these guys, you're trying to get them kind of targeted touches, and then can they be reliable after the catch? Can they be reliable in 50-50 situations? Mm-hmm. One guy who stood out for me a lot, well, two guys on the defense, I'll go three DBs. Barrett Upton Stout, I thought, had an awesome week. AZ Thomas had a really good week, I thought. And then Billy Bowman had the week I thought he looked like on tape 2 years ago. Obviously, both guys, they're very, like AZ Thomas is more of a first-round pick. These other guys, Billy Bowman, it depends what tape you value. And then, Upton Stout's a small school guy, obviously. Did those guys stand out for you as well? And, like, could all three be good? AZ Thomas has more of that, like, 6'2", 190 classic long corner build, which the other guys don't.
I was just gonna say, man, you're going for all the short ones there. You got 5'9" Billy Bowman. You got 5'8" Upton Stout.
Billy Bowman had one of the best lines I think I've heard on a football field in a while. I'm not going to say the player he was going against because I don't want to. Someone's going to somehow clip this and I'll like get shit for it. He basically, in a lesser extent, so I don't get canceled, in a walkthrough period was like, I just locked you up, you soft ass bitch. And like, I'll take out the rest of it. And I was like, dude, it's a walkthrough period in the Senior Bowl. What are we doing here? I kind of like it.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's what you want, right? Defensive side of the ball, those guys.
If you're going to be small and play DB, dude, you got to talk shit.
And he's like small, but he's not small. He's almost like 200 pounds, right? So he's like well built at safety position. But man, I think over the years, I don't want to say like I've learned my lesson, but just smaller guys, it gets harder. When you're Upton Stout and you're 178 pounds, it's hard in the NFL. What is your answer for AJ Brown, right? When you're Billy Bowman, you have not even a 5'10" wingspan. How is it like to tackle Saquon Barkley in space, right? You better be on point with your area hit. And so I just I think over the years I've realized that just like tempering like those guys got to be standouts in college. And I actually like Bowman. I think he can play a role. I think smaller guys like that are hard nosed at the safety position can be more Swiss Army knives and can like do some things on the defense. But it is just tough. Az Thomas is the one where like, yeah, we could talk about him as because 6'5" wingspan. He's still super young. I believe still only 20 years old. Doesn't turn 21 for a while. I worry about his twitch. He's just not quite as tuned up as you would like a first round corner. If you actually go back and just like do studies on first round corners that test sub 4.3, high 30s plus vertical and like high 10s broad jump, those guys, the hit rate on those is high. If you got good college tape and you're a high end athlete, there are not a lot of misses. The guys who miss more often than not in the first round are the ones who the tape is great, but it's like, why are they going to run? Are they running like a low 4.5? It's not to say they can't hit, right? There's a lot of slow corners that have been awesome over the last decade and a half, but it's just that those are the ones more often that you worry about. So he's the one where like I liked him as a fringe first rounder, like maybe back end of the first round going in. I still think that's where he ends up, but you are also banking on him get some development because he is so young at only 20 years old.
I think if there's a world in which he gets to 40, I think the Jets are whatever 42. I don't know that he'll get there, or even if he slips, into day two. If you're the Jets, you're like, hey, we're going to lose DJ Reed. We could have someone like, he can play a similar role to what Sauce can. Now Sauce can travel. We can let Az Thomas guard their 3 because Michael Carter can take their 2. Like that to me is like a good landing spot. I just don't know if he's going to fall as far just because, again, corner's a premium spot. And body type wise, he just makes sense for a lot of teams at the back half of the first round. Last group here is the tight ends. And I know Tyler Warren. I'm very curious where you're going to go with Tyler Warren because I really like the player. My only reservation is that, like, I think we've gotten to the point where because this class has that fluctuation, as we mentioned, I actually hope he doesn't test because I think he's going to test and it's going to be like, that wasn't really that exciting. Like, that's kind of disappointing. And it doesn't mean he's any less of a player. He's not a tier 1 athlete. And to take a tight end in the top 7 to me is really risky. Especially like when Brock Bowers, and I know it's not a comp for comp, but like Brock Bowers going the mid-teens last year as the best player in the SEC for 3 straight years, like has in the back of my head, like, am I taking Tyler Warren, who was a 3rd-round pick going into the year, in the top 7 now? I have a little bit of trepidation. At 15 for the Jets, if they traded back, sure, Tyler Warren all day, I get it. 7 feels rich. Am I crazy? Am I being like an asshole here?
No, 7's way too rich. And I want you to take it back that you don't want him to run because I am going to put his over in every single parlay of the combine that I have because he's getting all this hype, right? And if you go and watch like the combine 40 projections that always go up on Prize Picks or Underdog, a lot of times they're like based off of hype and like kind of who the guy is. They're not always based off tape. And he is not going to run fast, man. He will run. I would put the over-under on him at 4.75, which for a first-round tight end is crawling. I'm trying to think if there's been any in recent memory. You probably have to go back about 15 years to go to a guy who was slower than 4.75 going in the first round. But not a lot of guys also go for over 1,000 yards, right? And not a lot of guys have his level of polish. And he's such a good underneath route runner. Intermediate, just like he knows how to use his size. He's huge, 6'6", 260. He's like a Jason Witten. Like that's who you're getting, and he can do that in his sleep. And so you're getting a really good player. It's not really getting a Brock Bowers. You're not getting a guy who's going to alter the explosiveness of your offense. Now, if you're facing a lot of too high defenses, that's valuable, right? The guy that just can rake at that area of the football field. The top 10, I don't know. I think that's too rich for me. That just is if a guy's not going to bring dynamism to the position.
Yeah, 2 guys that stood out, and then we'll finish up with one question here. I thought Mason Taylor had a really nice week down in Mobile. I thought he stood out a lot. I think he's a guy who maybe it's round 3 or round 4, but like this is a comp Jets fans probably won't enjoy at this point. But in a lot of ways, he reminded me a little bit of Jeremy Rucker coming out, where it's like I don't know what he's amazing at, but like I feel like he's kind of good at everything. And I know, and I know it sounds like a bad comp now, but like the body type looks good. The good program, good lineage, like everything, like the boxes you want
Yeah.
to check in that position, the toughness, etc. And then Elijah Arroyo, who's kind of came out of nowhere, obviously looks like he runs like Isaiah Pacheco. If you see him in person, it's like every step you're like, dude's trying to stomp on ants, but like, and it's so many moves, and you're like, what is going on? But he's wide open every time, and he's a huge body. He weighed in as a big, he was 250 or so at Mobile. Those two guys, did you like what you saw, and like how off base is the these comps?
Yeah, so I feel the same way about Mason Taylor. I think Jeremy Ruckert, though, it's just like turn the athleticism just like knob up a little, right? Like he's just got a little bit more than
Pushing
Ruckert.
Tom's Rucker right now, so it is a good thing.
Yes. But I agree though, there's not a lot of weaknesses to his game, but there's not much he does that I'm like, oh man, look at that. I think he's got very reliable hands though. And that's half of what it means to be a tight end, right? Is reliability. So that's he's good. He's not great. He's a solid. If you get him in the third round, you're probably happy as heck about drafting that guy. Arroyo is definitely just like a little bit, not a little bit. He's just far more intriguing because he has traits that are, turned way up, right? The knob is about as high as it gets in this draft class, truthfully, in terms of what this guy can do physically. Now he's far more wide receiver than tight end at the moment, but like you see it, and the body type is incredible. 6'9" wingspan, and still 251 pounds, and he's trim. He's like a trim 251. The guy can put on some more, it looks like, and still be an athlete. So he's much more exciting if you want a receiver who could be a game changer for you at the next level. And I think because of that, he'll probably be the one that gets drafted higher when it's all said and done. I think at this point, he's probably a second rounder based off of what he did at Senior Bowl.
Yeah, I would agree. I shouted him out last pod. We won't do a whole Jackson Hall's segment, but that dude is going to be such a good blocker in the NFL, and whoever drafts him, like year one, your run game is going to get better. I don't know if he'll ever be more than a 15 catch a year guy, but like it doesn't matter. It literally doesn't matter. Like as long as he can catch the football in a tight end leak like once every 3 weeks, we're good. Just block your face off, dude. Last question here. Obviously I know you're down in New Orleans right now at the Super Bowl, and I'll talk more about the Super Bowl on Saturday, but I don't want to say gun to your head because I know it's probably a terrible phrase to use, but 7th overall pick as of February 5th. And if you get this right now, I'll post it. And if you don't, I'll edit this part out. Not necessarily who will the Jets pick. You can do who you think the Jets will pick, but who would be the pick that you're sitting there, CBS desks, on draft night, and you're like, holy shit, like that's an awesome fit for the Jets. Like that pick gets me excited, on draft night.
See, like that's that range that I was telling you. Like, there's no one I love there, but I think this one would get me really excited, and it's Will Johnson out of Michigan, just because like him and Sauce. I love the idea of just two corners. Obviously, they had that with DJ Reed, but two corners who fit what Aaron Glenn wants to do, right? Like that's an Aaron Glenn type of corner who's going to be able to play press man, and you're just going to be able to live in press. And when you have two guys who could just live in press, you have just everything else becomes easier for your defense. You don't have to necessarily play man all the time. You don't necessarily have to, have those guys track and whatnot. But you just disrupt timing. If you just say, I can disrupt timing of anyone, and I think Will Johnson's like playmaking abilities gets a little underrated. Like the guy sees the game at a really high level. So you have two of those guys. You just have really good defense. I just think you have really good pass defense. So that's the guy where I'm like, that makes a lot of sense for them.
Yeah. No, I think for me, as it presently stands, I don't know what Mason Graham. We're not going to get into right now because I think he's very hard to like. It's the production's awesome and the tape's really good, but like again, it's similar to Tyler Warren in just the aspect of like you're taking a non-elite athlete in the top 10, and it's just you do have to like think about that stuff of like, is that worth the 4th overall pick versus a guy I can get in round 2 that can I get 85% of the production with a better athlete? Like that's just, again, it's something to keep in mind. Not that I'm not shitting on Mason Graham. It's just, it is the one question you have there. Where like Q is an elite athlete and it was like a 1-year starter that you were like, whoa, like what could he become? He's become an all pro. Just a little different there. Mike, tell us what you got.
I will, in Graham's defense, I think his short shuttle is going to be elite. Like
Yeah,
he has an elite trait. He has an elite trait. And so I think he still could be an impactful NFL player. But I'm with you in that. If you're putting him in an echelon of some of the DTs we've seen go that highly, I'm not ready to get there with.
Yeah, no, I just it'll be curious to see what happens. Tell us what you got kind of come up here. Obviously, I know you're down in New Orleans, and then I'll be with you in a couple weeks in Indy.
Yes, sir. We have Pushing the Pile shows on CBS Sports Network tomorrow, 1 to 3 Eastern, and Friday, 1 to 2 Eastern. And then it's not until after the combine, but I will be having a draft show weekly on Mondays post combine every single week. Don't know exactly what time, don't know exactly the name, but just be on the lookout for that.
Does Aaron Rodgers play football in 2025?
Dude, I hope so at this point. Honestly, it's just the best. That's the Jets' best option. I just want him to play with like a real play caller. I want him playing like a real offense. I know it's like his own bed that he made, but I don't think he lost a ton. He's obviously like going to be hard to stay healthy with his play style, but I don't think the arm is like gone. He still has some left in the tank, more than anyone they could sign and what they have in the tank.
Yeah. Plus, not having Devontae back to not have to address receiver would be, again, make things a lot easier. I still think he's going to retire, but if he doesn't, I think he's back with the Jets, and there's a world in which you can make it work. Mike, appreciate hopping on as always. I'll be back on the pod on Saturday. We'll do some Super Bowl stuff. We'll talk some more Jets hirings and clearing out of the front office. Appreciate it as always, and we'll talk to you guys later this week.